This talk title is actually a little bit longer, but I had to shrink it down. And I say I mean how I, sort of like the royal I, me and my team, me and my collaborators, we ended up building something really ridiculous with a game. But it's actually the largest and most diverse behavioural data set in scientific history. And I'm going to tell you 4 short stories today, which sort of like blend together why we did it, how we did it, a massive problem we discovered, and what I think we should do about it. So, a little bit about me. 19 years ago, I started making games with my brother. And my brother isn't just my brother in this story, he's my co-founder of my first games business. We came up in the Flash era. We were there with the early iPhone games. And together we made games that hundreds of millions of people were playing when we were just in our early 20s. So I was very young at the time this happened. And towards the end of our time, actually sorry if I get emotional about this part. Towards the end of our time making games together, he received a diagnosis of schizophrenia, which was obviously a very stressful time for him and a super eye-opening experience for me, because I had to learn in real time what that meant, crisis point. And I was learning in real time. And it comes out of nowhere, seemingly, this crisis point, but it actually doesn't. The warning signs are there, we just are not trained to look for them. And this is not an uncommon story. I think we're all affected by some version of this. It's not just schizophrenia that has these potential early warning signs, it's other brain diseases or mental health issues. This signal is there, we just don't have the tools to read it. But around that time I was really fortunate, aside from that situation, to be in contact with the Wellcome Trust. And I was invited to go to the Sanger Institute and meet up with a bunch of game developers and neuroscientists. It wasn't a scoped or briefed kind of event. It was more about, was there any overlap here? Was there something we could do together? And that's where I met Michael Hornberger, absolute legend. He listened to me asking so many seemingly stupid questions, but I felt quite pointless making games at that point. But the benefit was being in both of the rooms at the same time, talking to a neuroscience who could answer the questions about my brother, but also being a game developer. And I realised there's a massive data gap. This data for neuroscience didn't exist that we assume does. We don't know how the healthy brain works or looks. They were doing these tiny studies, to me, making games where hundreds of millions of people were playing them. They were doing studies of 20 people, maybe 200 people if they're lucky. And they're expensive, the tests are super boring and sometimes quite invasive. They have to do extra testing like lumbar puncture or brain scans. So, long story short, was there a way that we could see warning signs before crisis point? And I needed an answer at a scale I felt no lab study could really reach. And that's what led to See Here Quest. So, when I say how big was it, we had 4.3 million players. And how diverse. We covered 192 countries with a video game distributed on a mobile platform with a fairly even gender split. This is something that never happens for volunteer studies. And I think the magic here was super simple, right? People were already playing games, but I think gaming can kind of feel like a guilty pleasure. We do it in our private time, we shy away from it being something we really talk about. I hear this thing where people say, I'm not a gamer, but they spend so much of their time playing games. And I think therein lies a massive opportunity, because when we did See Here Quest, we weren't asking people to change their behaviour, we were asking them to change what game they played. I wanted to make people proud of playing so they could value the time they spent more and also contribute to something bigger than that moment that they were having in that game. And we came up with a number based on the data, so it's not completely ethereal, that 2 minutes of play would equal about 5 hours of data if it was generated in a lab setting. And we showed people And they absolutely loved that number because for the first time, your time meant more than the time you spent, and that really rarely happens in life. But then we kind of hit a wall, right? Cool project, cool data. We had loads of scientific validation coming out. I think we had about 15 papers published in 2020. And I was thinking, so what? What do we do now? I had no idea. It sort of surpassed all of our expectations. But I think, meanwhile, what was happening in the world around us was two major things had been quietly happening to our brains that weren't really showing up in health apps. I think, first of all, it's this concept of cognitive offloading, which I think is becoming louder and louder and louder. But it's not new. We've been using maps for years to offload our ability to get from place A to place B. We put all of our calendars in a kind of a website we can go on every day. We use calculators for everything. Our phone numbers are stored a long time ago in our phones. But now it's getting much bigger. It's our critical thinking with AI. It's our memory, short and long term. It's even our creativity. We're using our brains less and less, and it scares the hell out of me. The second thing is we're getting older, and we're getting older faster than any point in human history. So we're exercising our brains less and less, but we're asking them to last longer, and it doesn't add up. Here's what's strange to me, right? We track our bodies more than ever. We've got all these numbers. We've got sleep, heart rate, exercise, stress, blood pressure, calories. There's a number for absolutely everything, except our brains, right? And we don't really treat it the same as our bodies because it's a lot more complicated in some ways. And it's hard to know where to start. There's no litmus test. There's no early warning system. There's no signal until it breaks. You cannot change what you can't see. And this is where I think crisis point ends up in hospitals, overburdening, causing lots of issues. What we need is a brain metric, something that complements our physical health metrics, built specifically for the brain. That signal that we need long before something breaks so we can actually do something about it. So we're not just trapped in this situation that seems to come out of nowhere. And then I think it kind of hit me and our team that we might have actually already started building it, because we just didn't know we had. Because on the surface, our game is about navigating boats, but underneath the game, it's the first global lifespan baseline of navigation and how it changes over the course of a lifespan. 4.3 million people, 192 countries between ages 80 and 90 years old, with 31 scientific papers published on this dataset in 21 languages. It's scientifically validated, and it runs on the phone you all already own. You don't need any special hardware. A clinical lab, and this isn't me saying this is a research paper, said a clinical lab couldn't have done this in 50 years. And the reason we did is because we didn't start out doing that. So here's my argument. Spatial navigation should be a score that sits alongside our physical metrics, and it should be one of the first metrics that we kind of expose about the brain. It shouldn't be the only one. We should start to build this suite of things out. Dennis Chan at UCL, who's a specialist in early Alzheimer's detection, says that for years we've known that people with Alzheimer's dementia, they get lost as an initial symptom. Right? So let's expose that as a number that we can read and do something about. We exercise our brains, and we've been trying to do it for a long time with things like Sudoku, crosswords, Duolingo, Wordle, and there's a whole genre of brain training games that have overpromised and underdelivered and got sued heavily in the process. But spatial is different, and here's why. And when I say spatial, I mean spatial navigation. So, taxi drivers, love them or hate them. The ones in London, the ones who have learnt the knowledge, right, under a brain scan, they have an enlarged hippocampus. This area of the brain is the region most tied to navigation, and it's grown by using it. It's one of the only parts of the brain that can grow. It's not just a structural change either. So a BMJ paper from December 2024 shows that ambulance drivers and taxi drivers are the least likely of any profession to get Alzheimer's. even when you take into consideration other lifestyle risk factors like heart disease, etc. So even when you account for all of that and normalise for it, 2 studies, and there's many more, but in the same direction, navigation skills are trainable, and spatial navigation appears to protect us against the things that we're worried about happening to our brains in the future. Now, caveat, do not go to your doctors if you're a bad navigator after this talk. That's not my intention, right? The industry is not ready for us to be rocking up going, oh my God. Everyone has a personal baseline. And we've seen this in our studies. If you're a bad navigator, that doesn't mean you're getting Alzheimer's. It means that's where you start from, or we're talking about monitoring over time. Like you might monitor your heart rate. A single number on its own is kind of meaningless. It's about finding and spotting the trends and then comparing them to the benchmark data set. So now we can get a little bit nerdy now we've got this under our belt, because I think, here we go. You might be asking, how does the game work? So see here a quest. It is about navigating a map, and you're sort of moving around in these kind of waters. But on the left-hand side, you can see a map that's sort of obscured. I should be using this thing. And I think I start off about here, and then I'm traveling here, and then I'm meant to go here, and then here. What's actually happening is after I close this map, I don't get to see it again. So I'm encoding this 2D image of these destinations, and they're not in order. And so when I get into the game and I'm navigating the 3D boat, I'm constantly referencing this part of my brain, hippocampus, responsible for our hunter-gatherer instincts, to find where 1 is in relation to 2, in relation to 3, and then that's it. And once we have finished this, at the end we get this kind of cool-looking trajectory. I don't know why the Y is off, but we kind of call this a path or a trajectory. And the path length is actually a very, very good indicator of performance, because if you have a short path, you took a really good route. If you did a long path, you probably did really badly at the route. So there's some nice kind of things here to lean on. But that is not the only, that's not the full story. Where it gets super interesting is when we work with our scientific collaborators, of which we have accumulated many across the globe. The guys at CNRS lab, Antoine Coutreau has a lab there called Lyris, Hugo Spears at UCL. We've worked, and I have to read this because it's complicated, on an algorithm that classifies navigational styles from the trajectory paths, right? And then it categorizes your trajectory style into navigation buckets. And if you imagine, let's say there are 10 buckets. 1 is the worst navigator, and bucket 10 is the fittest navigator. And I think it's okay to say fit navigator if we think about the hippocampus as a muscle. It does seem weird when you say it out loud. But if you can classify styles, and we know we can train, or potentially train, we know we can sort of increase the volume here, we can design levels that stress test specific traits. That means we can do more than just measure where someone is. We can actually coach them towards where they should be, and we can eventually track whether that coaching changes their risk of Alzheimer's dementia over time. The impact of Alzheimer's, by the way, is just one particular brain disease. This has impact area in lots of them, but this is where a lot of the research focus has been. So, I could have put some really soul-crushing quotes up here, and I didn't, because I thought, already potentially I was going to get emotional at the start. But we put a waitlist up on our website because See Here Request was originally launched in 2016, and we took it offline in 2019. We recently acquired the rights from the person we built it for to bring it back to the public, and we're in the process of just about switching it live now, which is very exciting because I think it's a massive journey ahead of us. But I wasn't expecting a clap. But 9,000 people so far have just signed up because they've found us through the ether. Even though it happened 10 years ago, they have left really cool comments, like, I've played this years ago, I'd love to know how I compare now. And I'm a physio who works with older adults, and I've been waiting for something like this. And people who have Alzheimer's running in their family who are interested in finding out about their navigation performance. So I think there's a real demand there from people who are sort of like discovering us through their own pain or fear or curiosity through this, which is really exciting. So, we're 10 years in at this point, and I feel like really we are just getting started. This truly, to me, is the power of games. Spatial navigation is the first metric, and I feel like episodic memory is the next. We're already planning on that going into the game. And then other domains of cognition that I think we should be measuring with games to make it easy and accessible for people to take part in scientific research, but also to find out about how they're doing in that moment, so we can make decisions earlier about our brain health. Thanks.